On today's episode of Locked On MLB, I talk a little bit about Jackie Robinson's legacy. And I'm recording right here at Dodger Stadium for the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson, the integration of baseball. This is Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Thanks so much for making us your first listen, as we're available on all your free podcasting platforms. As you can tell, I'm recording this at Dodger Stadium. I'm recording this on the 15th day of April. It's Jackie Robinson Day. It's the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson's integration of baseball. And I'm here. I'm at Dodger Stadium. I'm here to be part of the festival. Follow us on Twitter, on Locked On MLB Pods. Same handle for Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. You know, they've got the loudspeaker going, and so the idea of actually recording a podcast on here at the ballpark may not be the smartest thing in the world to do, but I just wanted to be here and, you know, just show you that there's going to be hopefully some wonderful festivities here. This is the 75th anniversary of Jackie breaking the color barrier and doing it as a member of the Brooklyn Dodgers, not of the Los Angeles Dodgers, of course. But you know, the fact of the matter is, it's a event that is celebrated all across baseball. For every single team are wearing number 42. All the players are. And it's one of the great moments in the game. Now, I want to talk a little bit in today's podcast about my thoughts on why the segregation of baseball is the most agonizing what-if in baseball history, and some of the ways that the Jackie Robinson narrative, the Jackie Robinson mythology has been, I don't know, I don't want to say corrupted, but it's been, there are elements of the story which are actually more heroic than the mythology. I have found that over the years, when we find people who are larger than life, people who are heroes that are looked upon as people that everyone seems to look up to, there seems to be I don't know, for the lack of a better word, a desire to make them seem greater than human, when actually their humanity is what makes them more appealing. And there's a couple elements of his story that haven't been told that I find, I don't know, it's a little disturbing that they're tucked away. But for right now, I'm going to be all positive. For this section of the podcast, I'm going to be all positive as they're playing, you know, the music here. You know, I'm going to probably have to cut this short right now because I don't know what music this is, but I don't know if we have the rights to it. But it's incidental. But celebrating Jackie Robinson is a positive thing. They were handing out these replica uniforms here at Dodger Stadium with number 42 on them, and people are wearing them all across the stadium. It's just a wonderful celebration. I don't know who's going to be here to celebrate it. I'm going to throw a couple of videos of me here at the game. But anything that will teach people that A, the heroism of Jackie Robinson, but B, the complete injustice that happened beforehand. And that may be awkward for some people to hear. That may be uncomfortable for some people to hear. And my only response to that is good. It should make some people feel uncomfortable to hear about how there was great injustices of people not being allowed to play Major League Baseball simply because of their pigment. The thing about the segregation of baseball, that what for me personally makes it the most agonizing what if, as I mentioned earlier, is beyond the social injustice, beyond the obvious prejudice and just ignorance. History was denied great baseball. History was denied an alternate universe that would still resonate today. You can't start a conversation with a Yankee fan without them bring up all the championships they've won. I think it's 26, 27, I can't remember, I've lost count. You go to Pittsburgh and they have images of Honus Wagner. You go to St. Louis, they have images of Rogers Hornsby. You know, they have this celebration of pre-integration baseball is still part of our culture. When the Cubs hadn't won the World Series for all those years, it had gone back to 1908, well before Jackie Robinson's integration of the game, I believe before he was born. And so the events of those series, those World Series that were played well before 1947, are still part of our culture, still part of how we talk about the game. Babe Ruth is still part of the game. Joe DiMaggio is still part of the game. And so when you bring up the people like, obviously the big ones like Satchel Paige or Josh Gibson or Cool Papa Bell, or some of the Hall of Famers like Butch Wilson or Turkey Stearns or Ray Dandridge, go down the line. Those should not just be shadowy figures of baseball's past. They're like, oh, if only they were in. Those should be great St. Louis Cardinals or Boston Braves or St. Louis Browns players. Who knows the way, when you take a look at some of the cities that try to support more than one major league team, like Philadelphia, like Boston, that didn't have to, that no longer has two major league teams, like St. Louis. Would one of them have a different history? Would one of them have more success if they had integrated? If they had brought in players who were very good, who could have helped them win a World Series or 8? Think about some of the great players of baseball since Jackie Robinson. And obviously you can bring up Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. You can bring up Reggie Jackson and Bob Gibson. You can bring up Ozzie Smith and Dave Winfield and Andre Dawson and Tim Raines and Ricky Henderson. You can also think of all the dark-skinned Latino players like Mariano Rivera, like David Ortiz, like all these people who would not have been allowed to play in Major League Baseball. Hold on, I gotta climb over here. This is the danger of trying to record something in a stadium. Someone's trying to come through that aisle. I found a pretty empty aisle there. There's no Big Papi, there's no Derek Jeter, there's no A-Rod, there's no Mariano Rivera. You think about some of the great, there's no Mookie Betts. You go through what our baseball history would be. There'd be no Albert Pujols. There'd be no Miguel Cabrera. So many tremendous players. Forget Vladimir Guerrero Jr., there would be Vladimir Guerrero Sr. Start assembling baseball teams without them. And think about the players we never heard of. We just heard of the Hall of Famers. And really you have to be a baseball historian to know who some of them are. But there are no role players who would have been great heroes. Think about whether it's like Francisco Cabrera's pennant-winning hit, Glenn Bragg's leaping over the wall to catch that home run in the NLCS, someone like a Terry Pendleton becoming a surprise MVP. All of those players would not be part of our history, which means there was a Francisco Cabrera who we never heard of before. There was a Terry Pendleton we never heard of before. And that they've been lost to history. And the fact of the matter is, Jackie paved the way for that to be over. And that history that's lost forever. We can never rewrite that. All the inducting the legends into the Hall of Fame from the Negro Leagues, all the honoring as many who are still with us, will never correct that great injustice. And that should be the thing that we think about at Jackie Robinson night. Well, they're about to start the festivities here at Dodger Stadium. I know this is not going to be the greatest sound in the world, but that is for the danger of trying to do a podcast here at the stadium. Anyway, all right, let's enjoy this. And thanks for watching. We're going to go for section 2. Probably won't be at the stadium. We'll see it for sure. But they're about to start the ceremonies here. And, man, I'm just glad I'm here at a ball game. Well, the ball game is over. And I don't know if you can tell right there. We're going to be doing a fireworks show here pretty soon. So if I thought the loudspeaker was going to be bad for the noise, I have to say something, though. The ceremony they had for Jackie Robinson was unbelievable, and They had David Robinson, who is the son of Jackie, speak, and Rachel Robinson was there. Rachel Robinson is on the verge of being 100 years old, and she was here at Dodger Stadium tonight. And the fact of the matter is that she was there. I have to admit, I got teary-eyed knowing that she was here, and this might be the last Jackie night she ever is going to be here. She's hitting triple digits, you know. So the fact that I was able to be here and give her a standing ovation along with everyone else, 51,000 fans here today. Baseball creates the illusion of timelessness, that the past, present, and future are all happening simultaneously. And I got a real sense of that tonight when I saw that Rachel Robinson was there. You're looking down at her, and that was the woman who was by Jackie's side, and she's still here. Anyone who thinks that this is ancient history or not relevant, she's still here. Well, I can just tell you, it was a wonderful night of baseball. The Los Angeles Dodgers beat the Reds 3-1, but they had all the tributes here. Curtis Granderson and several other former Dodgers, David Price, who's a current Dodger, all were there to present gifts to Rachel and to the family. The wonderful tributes they had by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, by Magic Johnson, by Bill Clinton, they had Carl Erskine. This was another thing, is Carl Erskine on video performed "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" on the harmonica. If you don't know Carl Erskine, he was a teammate of Jackie Robinson. Was one of the boys for summer. So this was a night, it was my first baseball game of the year, first one to go live at least, as we see behind me. There's Dodger Stadium. It's my first live baseball game that I'm at for the year. And to have it be the present, 2022, thinking about the future, how is the season going to unfold, and honoring the past, this is really a night where it all came together. And by the way, I went to the game by myself. I love going to baseball games by myself. That's just, it's a quirk of mine. And I moved around. It was hard to move around today, as I said, because there were 50-some-odd thousand fans here. But I wound up sitting next to these two women who were teachers in Watts. And we were just talking baseball and our love for, they were both rabid Dodger fans. And that's why I love going to the game by myself, is if you can kind of bounce around, you're with tens of thousands of people who are here for a common reason, which is we want to see the game. And these two people, I'd never met them before, we're never going to meet again probably, and yet we had a great time laughing and watching the game and making observations. And this was a game where it all folded in together. I'm not going to lie to you, I cried when I saw Rachel Robinson. I was able to give her a standing ovation along with everybody else. I'm not going to lie to you, the tributes made me tear up. And I'm not going to lie to you, it was a thrill watching a game, which was a pretty good game. It was 3-1. The Dodgers probably should have scored more runs than they did. They left a bunch of runners on base. One of the runs they got in was by a walk. There's a couple of triples there, and it was a pretty well pitched game. There was a couple of really nifty plays that were made, and then there was a triple that just went right past Joey Votto at first base. But good solid game, 3-1 final. We're about to have a fireworks display here. And man, this is quite a night for baseball. I still have a few thoughts I want to give, but I want to be all positive right now. All positive. The past was honored. The present looks pretty good. And the future, it's going to be fun. A lot of fun. Well, the game was over, and it's the next day. The face you see right behind me here, this is the Jackie Robinson memorial they have in front of Pasadena City Hall. It's actually the Robinson brothers, because there's the bust of Jackie, and right next to them right there, that's the bust of Mac Robinson, who was Jackie's brother and was a Olympian. was in the Olympics that was in Berlin, the same one where Jesse Owens essentially showed up Hitler and the Nazi movement. You know, there's a element of Jackie's story that always seems to be excluded when I see books that are written for children, and that when you see several of the biographies, including the movie 42, several of the documentaries seem to focus on certain elements of Jackie's life and omit others, including Mac. The fact that his brother was an Olympian, an Olympic hero, doesn't always seem to enter his story and show what an inspiration he was to his brother, and also the fact that he saw that his brother was somewhat neglected after being an Olympian. There's some other elements of Jackie's story that seem to be sometimes omitted from the storyline. You know, there's almost a fetish to want to portray Jackie as some sort of a martyr, as someone who took our slings and arrows, took the criticism, and did it passively, and did it without fighting back. And it is true that Branch Rickey told him not to fight back for the first 2 years, because it would have possibly derailed the experiment if they saw the first black player was fighting. But the fact of the matter is that was only the first 2 seasons. And Jackie played a lot more than 2 seasons. And when he was told that his, shall we say, his restrictions were lifted, he fought. He fought on the field. He fought off the field. He fought with teammates. He fought with other members of the baseball establishment. He fought with umpires. He fought with the press. Later, he fought with other civil rights leaders, including Malcolm X. He was a fighter. He was not passive. And don't get obsessed over the first 2 years where he was told to lay down and to not fight back in the abuse and just let his bat and his play speak for him. He did do that. But later he spoke up. Later he spoke up big time. He spoke out against what he thought was wrong. And he didn't care if he rocked the boat. He clashed with his own teammate, Roy Campanella, who he thought was too passive in all things in terms of civil rights. He clashed with the Kennedy family, and in fact embraced the Republican Party and Richard Nixon initially because the Democrats were dragging their heels on civil rights and shamefully embracing the KKK as political allies. But Jackie was very difficult to pin down politically, because once he saw that the Republicans had embraced Goldwater instead of Nelson Rockefeller, he was a big Rockefeller Republican, he rejected the direction the Republicans were going in. In fact, would not agree to his famous appearance in the 1972 World Series. He was not going to show up if Richard Nixon had shown up, because he felt that that would be an implied endorsement on his part. He was a fighter. He even used that speech at the World Series to raise attention of the fact that there were no black managers in baseball, and he wanted something to be done with that. He wasn't passive. And also, there seems to be how shall we say, almost a fetish to portray a story of him being totally alone. There was no one else there with him. Yes, he was the first one to break the color barrier. Do you know what Dan Bankhead did? And Willard Brown and Hank Thompson did? Do you know what they all did? They were African Americans who played in Major League Baseball that same year of 1947. You almost never hear that. Like in 42, where they spent so much time trying to portray the scene when Pee Wee Reese put his arm around him so that white audiences had someone to cling to and say, well, I would have acted like Pee Wee. By the way, there's no proof that that ever happened. There's no evidence that Pee Wee Reese put his arm around Jackie in a game in Cincinnati to quell the fans. Jackie was followed by reporters all year. Almost every action he did was photographed. There's no photographs of that event. And if you saw that movie, the very action doesn't make sense. He would have to run clear across the diamond to put his arm around him because he was playing first base. It's there to make white audiences feel better about themselves. But the idea of showing that scene and not the scene where Dan Bankhead joins the team. Who's Dan Bankhead? He was an African-American player who was Jackie's teammate. Wouldn't that have been an interesting thing to show? Wouldn't that have shown that the movement was more than just a lone martyr? I kind of get a little, I don't know, defensive when I see his legacy of that being portrayed as someone who is a lone martyr instead of a fighter who joined people together. So honor him and try to see that that's who he was. And when people are criticizing, maybe some of the people have criticized me in some of the podcasts I know, when someone talks about some of the players today saying, stick to baseball, stick to the sport, know your spot. We don't want that to interfere with our enjoyment of the game. Do you know what? They said the same thing about him. Now, I know some of you would be offended if I compared someone like Kaepernick or someone to Jackie. And I know some of you get upset when you hear Kaepernick say something like, I could not salute the flag because I'm a black man in a white man's world. I'll tell you that Kaepernick didn't say that. Jackie Robinson said that. He's a complicated man and a hero because he was a fighter. Don't neuter his legacy. And by the way, he was a fighter to the end. I'm doing this in front of Pasadena City Hall. If you're here right over there, there's a protest going on for democracy in Asia. I guarantee you, Jackie would have supported them because he always fought for people who were looking for justice, where justice was having a hard time finding its way. Honor the man, honor who he was. Don't make him a passive martyr. Honor him as a man who fought right to the very end. So follow us at Locked On MLB Pods. Follow me at Sully Baseball. And thanks so much for watching this video, which is hopefully going to be a celebration for someone who we should all admire because of what he stood for, because of how he fought, and how he lived, and how he made us all a little better. And be happy that someone like Rachel Robinson is still with us. And the fight is going to keep going on. This is Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.